At 80, Eric Clapton finally tells the truth about George Harrison. Eric Clapton was born Eric Patrick Clapton on March 30, 1945 in Ripley, Surrey, England. He grew up in a strange family setup. Clapton thought his grandparents were his real parents and his mom was his big sister. Finding out the truth hurt him a lot and later helped him put his feelings into his music. From when he was little, he really loved the guitar. He listened a ton to blues records by guys like Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, and B.B. King. Those early favorites shaped his music style and made him the kind of artist who mixed American blues with cool British rock ideas. Clapton first got famous in the early 1960s when he played with the Yardbirds. That band was right in the middle of the big British blues wave. Even though the Yardbirds got popular and made money, Clapton quit in 1965. He thought they were moving too far away from real blues to chase a poppier sound. Sticking to what felt real, even if it meant less fame, became a big part of who he was. After leaving the Yardbirds, Clapton joined John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers. That's where people started calling him Slow Hand. He built a name as an amazing blues guitar player full of feeling, skill, and exact playing. In 1966, Clapton started the famous power trio Cream with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. With Cream, he took rock music to new places by mixing made-up jams, heavy blues, and trippy sounds into something totally new. Songs like Sunshine of Your Love and White Room showed off his wild guitar solos and how much more sure he was as a player and performer. Cream only stayed together 2 years because of fights and different ideas inside the band. But even that short time made Clapton a huge rock star around the world and started the whole guitar hero thing. After Cream broke up, Clapton put together another supergroup called Blind Faith with Steve Winwood, Ginger Baker, and Rick Gretsch. Blind Faith put out just one album, but it had lasting great songs like Can't Find My Way Home. That quick project showed Clapton's always moving music spirit, always looking for fresh sounds and deeper feelings. He also worked with Delaney and Bonnie and then Derek and the Dominoes. Their 1970 album Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs turned into one of rock's all-time best records. The main song, Layla, came from Clapton's secret love for Pattie Boyd, who was married to his friend George Harrison. It stays one of the most famous love songs ever, with its burning guitar parts and super raw feelings. Even with his career going so high, Clapton's life had really hard parts with addiction. In the 1970s, he fought heroin addiction and then drinking too much. Those fights almost ruined him as a person and as a musician. But he kept going, and with help from friends, he beat those problems. Getting better gave strength and hope to other people going through the same thing. Being open about his hard times made him seem more real to fans. It showed that behind the guitar, God was just a regular guy fighting his own private fights. Clapton's work in the 1980s and later had new music styles and big personal sadness. He had a huge loss when his 4-year-old son, Connor, died in a terrible accident in 1991. From that deep hurt came Tears in Heaven, one of his saddest and most loved songs ever. It touched millions with its soft tune and words that break your heart. The song was a way to remember his son and also spoke to so many people who knew grief and loss. It made Clapton's place in music stronger, not just as a top guitar player, but as someone who tells real human stories through songs. Over the years, Clapton played with so many amazing famous musicians like George Harrison, Bob Dylan, J.J. Cale, and B.B. King. He could switch easily between blues, rock, pop, and even reggae, like in his great version of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff. Trying all those kinds of music kept his songs new and exciting for different ages. But his strong blues roots gave everything he did a real feeling that hardly anyone else could copy. Eric Clapton's private life was always tied closely to his music and to the people he cared about most. One of the biggest friendships and love stories in his life started in the late 1960s when he got really close to George Harrison from the Beatles. Their friendship was not just light or simple. It came from really respecting and loving each other's music talent. Clapton got to join Harrison's world, playing guitar on Beatles songs like While My Guitar Gently Weeps. They spent long hours talking ideas, trying new sounds, and working together in ways that made both of them better creatively. But under all the fun and music friendship, Clapton had a big personal problem. He fell in love with Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd, the English model who inspired Harrison's famous song, Something. Clapton's feelings for Boyd brought him both strong love and lots of pain. His one-sided love made him write some of his most famous songs, like The Honest Layla, that showed all his hurt and wanting. Things changed years later when Harrison and Boyd's marriage fell apart and they got divorced in 1977. Free from being married to Harrison, Boyd and Clapton finally made their long, messy relationship official. On March 27, 1979, in Tucson, Arizona, they got married. To many people, it felt like the end of a long love triangle that fans and newspapers love talking about. For Clapton, who fought addiction and the pain of wanting Boyd, the marriage felt like a win and a fresh start. But being married had its own tough parts. Clapton and Boyd really wanted kids, but they had sad problems. They had many miscarriages and even tried medical help. In 1984, they did in vitro fertilization, which was pretty new back then and hard on feelings. Sadly, it didn't work either, and it left them both crushed and put big stress on their marriage from dreams of being parents that didn't come true. In that rough time, Clapton made choices that changed things a lot. He had an affair with Italian model and actress Lori Del Santo. From that, a son was born. Connor Clapton came into the world on August 21, 1986, and brought some happiness into Clapton's messy personal life. But Connor's birth also hurt his marriage badly. When Boyd found out about Clapton's cheating and the son with Del Santo, she was heartbroken. The hurt was too much to fix, and their marriage broke apart. By 1989, Boyd and Clapton divorced. That ended a marriage many people once saw as the happy ending to one of rock's most talked-about love stories. The sadness in Clapton's life got even worse with the sudden death of his little son, Connor. On March 20, 1991, at only 4 years old, Connor fell from an open window on the 53rd floor of a building in Manhattan. It was a terrible accident that left Clapton full of sadness he couldn't even describe. That loss changed his life forever and shaped his music and how he saw things. From that huge pain, Clapton put his sadness into one of his most touching songs ever, Tears in Heaven. It's a gentle song that shows a dad's deep sorrow and hope to see his child again someday in heaven. The song touched millions and became one of his longest-lasting pieces, and a song many people turn to when they feel loss and need healing. Years later, after so much sadness, Clapton found love one more time. In 1998, when he was 53, he met Melia McEnery, a 22-year-old office helper, at a party in Columbus, Ohio, after one of his shows. At first, their connection was quiet and low-key. They dated privately for a year before telling people in 1999. Unlike his earlier big, dramatic romances full of problems and attention, this one brought him calm and steadiness. On January 1, 2002, they got married in a simple ceremony at St. Mary Magdalene Church in Ripley, the same little village where Clapton was born. It connected his new life back to where he started. Together they built the family Clapton always wanted, with 3 daughters who gave him joy and kept him steady after years of hard times, loss, and starting over. At 80 years old, Eric Clapton has lived a life most musicians can't even dream of, full of amazing wins, painful fights, and famous friendships. One of the most interesting and lasting parts of his story is the connection he had with George Harrison from the Beatles. For years, fans and writers guessed about their friendship, any rivalry, and the tricky love triangle with Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd. Now, in his older years, Clapton has finally talked openly about it. He looks back on how deep their bond was and shares truths he kept quiet about for most of his career. Clapton said Harrison was not just someone he played music with sometimes. He was like a brother to me, Clapton admitted, but there was always this quiet competition between us. Both were super talented guitar players, but in different ways. Clapton was fiery, full of passion, and all about blues. Harrison was more melodic, gentle, and full of spiritual feelings. Even with those differences, they really respected each other. Clapton remembered late-night jam times at Harrison's house where they'd play back and forth, laugh when they messed up, and push each other to get better. But their friendship had some hard spots too. The biggest one came when Clapton fell hard for Pattie Boyd, Harrison's wife. It was something a lot of people in rock knew but didn't say out loud, and Clapton never really said no to it. "I couldn't help how I felt," Clapton said. "I loved her with everything I had, and I think George knew it long before anyone else did." What could have broken up most friendships turned into one of the weirdest and longest-lasting bonds in music. Clapton put all his strong feelings and wanting into his songs, writing things like Layla that became big songs about heartbreak and desire. Harrison got hurt, but he never completely pushed Clapton away. Clapton said he carried guilt for years about what happened. "George was hurt, and I knew it," he confessed. "But the amazing thing about him was that he forgave me. He was the most forgiving man I've ever known." Harrison's kind and giving heart became a big part of how they stayed close. Even after Boyd left Harrison and then married Clapton, the two guys kept playing music together. They stood on stage side by side like nothing big had happened. To people watching, it looked almost impossible, but for them, music always fixed whatever hurts life brought. Clapton said their friendship's quiet strength showed even more later on, especially when Harrison got sick. "When George was sick, I visited him as often as I could," Clapton remembered quietly. "We didn't even have to talk much. Sometimes we'd just sit together, and the silence said more than words ever could." Harrison's death in 2001 hit Clapton really hard. He put together the concert for George the next year to honor his friend's life and music. That show, full of songs, laughs, and respect, became one of the things Clapton feels most proud of. Looking back now, Clapton says his time with Harrison changed him more than almost anything else. "I've played with so many great musicians in my life," Clapton said. "But George was special. He wasn't trying to outplay you or prove anything. He was just trying to make something beautiful. That taught me a lot about what music is really for." At 80, Clapton talks about Harrison with such softness that you can tell how much the friendship still matters to him. The tough guy act, the competition, and the love mess are gone. Instead, there's a simple truth he holds on to. Despite all the jealousy, heartbreak, fame, and years gone by, George Harrison was and always will be one of the greatest friends he ever had. "George had this light about him," Clapton said. "Even when things were dark, he carried peace with him. I miss him every day. And the truth is, I'll never stop missing him." For much of his early life and career, Eric Clapton's amazing guitar skills were hidden behind addiction problems. In the 1970s, he fought hard with drugs and alcohol. He fell into a way of living that almost took away his huge talent. But in 1982, he reached a big moment that changed his career and his whole life. Clapton bravely chose to stop drinking alcohol and using other party drugs. It wasn't quick or easy. It started a long, hard but winning fight to get back his health, his music, and his calm mind. Choosing to get sober became one of the biggest things he ever did. It gave him clear thinking to keep making music that reached millions. Even after beating alcohol and drugs, Clapton still had one more fight: smoking cigarettes. He smoked a lot for many years, and the habit stayed even after he quit the other stuff. It wasn't until 1994, more than 10 years after quitting the harder things, that Clapton finally put out his last cigarette. He left behind one of the last old chains from his past. This whole path of being strong and keeping going shows not just how normal and weak a rock star can be, but also how determined he was not to let his gift or his life get ruined. Clapton's story of quitting drinking, drugs, and finally cigarettes is more than just getting better. It shows how tough people can be, how much power a choice has, and how coming through hard times can open the door to making new creative things.